My name's Tony, I'm 47, and I live with my parents. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you've seen my previous videos, you'll also know that my parents and I moved to Ireland together a few years ago, and I'll talk more about Ireland in the next few weeks. Today, however, I thought I'd just fill in a bit more of my backstory and talk about why I decided to live with my parents again. So let's cut to the chase. The main reason I live with my parents is financial. If we had millions in the bank, I'm sure we'd all have our own beautiful homes with stunning views. But we don't. And there came a point where I had to have a massive rethink. See, I was born in 78, so technically Gen X, but when it comes to work and finances, I feel more like a millennial. But yeah, I grew up expecting to hit certain life goals. Good job, nice home. I think most people do, don't they? I know some folks are very happy as lifelong travellers, but I definitely wanted my own home. And I think for me that was compounded by the fact that I really didn't like the house or town I grew up in. So since being quite young, I had this very strong yearning to move to a place that really felt like home, you know? However, I was a bit of a dreamer. I did really well at school. I knew how to do school, how to study, how to get the grades. But I chose a ridiculous Bachelor of Arts degree, which was a lot of fun, but fairly useless to someone like me with no contacts in the creative industry. And when it came to doing life, I'm the first to admit I was completely clueless. And I'm also the first person in my family to go to uni. And, well, if you know, you know. In fact, I think I'm the only person in my family to do any formal education past the age of 16. And don't get me wrong, I'm very grateful for the education I've had. But being a first generation graduate can come with its own set of challenges, because what you'll always lack is cultural capital. Not that I even realised that at the time. I think I was well into my 30s before I even heard the term cultural capital. But it basically refers to all those unwritten rules of the game, right? Like the kinds of skills and behaviours and connections that basically help you navigate the world of wealthy people, whether that be in the workplace or education or social spheres. When you do come from a more working class background, you don't know any of that stuff. And what's worse is you don't know that you don't know. You just sort of stumble through feeling like you're always missing a piece of the puzzle. So for me, it was a case of go to uni, get your degree, fill your head with silly dreams, and then start looking for a job in the back of the local newspaper. Anyway, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but my point is, for reasons both external, society, and internal, me, the high salaries and deposit for a home just never happened. And of course, when you're paying rent, how on earth do you save for a deposit? Anyway, fast forward a few decades, some of which I touch on in my Leaving the UK video. And by the time I hit middle age, I was so tired. I was tired of fighting an uphill battle, and I had to admit defeat. And by then I'd spent over £125,000 on rent. Money I will never get back, obviously. And trust me, I wasn't living in a penthouse. And then the pandemic, which was a bit like hitting a giant pause button on life, wasn't it? It was obviously a horrible time for lots of people in lots of different ways. And for me, it coincided with some really difficult life events, which I can talk about another time. But basically, there was someone very special in my life that I'd been hoping to one day buy a home and settle down with, but he died. So yeah, I might talk about that another time. But that kind of loss really put things into perspective. So the reasons for buying a house with my parents aren't just financial. It's also about enjoying the years we have left together, especially as I'd lived so far away for so long. It's like we're catching up now. So around the time of the pandemic, when everything was going a bit pear-shaped, including myself, at that point, my parents were living in this teeny weeny tiny retirement bungalow, which was a shared ownership scheme. So you own half the property and you pay rent on the other half of the property. And they'd been hoping to move somewhere a little bit bigger, a little bit quieter, more peaceful, which is what all three of us wanted. So it just made sense to buy a place together that we could all share. And believe me, I count my blessings every single day that that was even an option for me. I'm honestly not sure what I would have done if it wasn't. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes I'd love to have my own place, and I'm sure they would too. But mostly this arrangement works really well for us. Life's all about compromise, isn't it? And it's been 3 years now, and we still haven't killed each other, so that's a win. I'm off the hamster wheel, and I finally have an asset and a secure long-term home to enjoy living in. And yeah, it's really nice. We all pitch in to keep the place looking decent, and we're here to look after each other on the days one of us might not be feeling our best. And as they get older and need a bit more help, I'm happy to be here for them. You know, I watched my mum care for her elderly parents, and I know it's difficult, and it's not something my parents ever expected of me, but I'm happy to do it. And I know it's going to be easier actually living with them than schlepping back and forth across town like my mum had to do for her parents. And you know, the thing is, while this might seem a bit weird in the West, this is a fairly typical living situation in the rest of the world. I mean, there'd usually be a few kids knocking around, and we can talk about kids another day. But my point is, 2 generations of adults living in the same house is pretty normal, and definitely makes sense when it comes to things like care, finances, and sharing household responsibilities. You know, I sometimes wonder if we got a little bit too carried away with individualism in the West. I mean, I'm all for self-expression, but then there's atomization. Even the word sounds sad. But it seems with today's economy, more and more people in the West are exploring, shall we say, alternative living arrangements. I've got friends in their 50s and 60s sharing with siblings. I know people buying a home with a friend rather than a life partner. And hey, if you get on well and you can find somewhere that enables you to all live your life pretty much how you want to, then why not? It's definitely worth considering. So if this video shows you anything, I hope it's that choosing an alternative living situation isn't a failure. It doesn't need to be stigmatized. It's just a very practical response to a changing economic climate. It's about making sensible choices with whatever resources you have available. So for me, that used to mean house shares and crappy apartments, and now it means living with my parents in Ireland. For someone else, that could mean sharing with a sibling, a cousin, or even going for something like living in a van or a tiny home or umpteen other life paths. It seems that once again I've touched on some pretty big and complex topics here. I guess that's just my conversational style. They're all things I'm really happy to unpack in future videos. Let's not get too academic. I'm just here for random musings about life and the universe and trying to make some sense of it all. But by all means, let me know in the comments if there's anything you'd like me to dig into next, and feel free to share your stories if you've found any alternative housing solutions. And as ever, thank you so much for watching. All your interaction and support really means a lot to me. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.